Hi guys, today we are going to speak about databases and in particular about MongoDB. So for this workshop I have created a small app very similar to what we have in Codeflix. So I'm displaying a list of users in the front end. So I'm displaying the name and the age. And at the moment this data is coming from the backend. So I have it saved in a JSON file in the backend, as you can see here. Are you a bit familiar with this setup? It's similar to Codeflix. Yeah. So if this works fine and we can display the data in the front end when we have the file saved in the back end, can anyone tell me what is the advantage of having a database?
Good question.
Anyone? Well, so the main reason why you will want to have a database is because you should have the code and the data separated. Because imagine you have a database that is updating every single day, but you have finished with the coding. So that will mean if you have the data in the backend, that will mean that you need to commit and push your changes every day. So that that wouldn't make sense if you have if you are like Netflix, for example. So thinking of databases, we have seen when we are thinking about data, we have seen this kind of communication. So with Express, we create this endpoint. And then from the back end, from the front end, we send a fetch, we fetch the data in this endpoint, and we send the data that we have stored in the back end, right?
Yeah.
So when we have a database will be running in another server, so we will have a new layer. In this case, this will be MongoDB. And how it will work is like the front end will request the data to the back end. And when the backend receives the request, it will request the data to the database. And then the database will send the data back to the backend. And then the backend will send the data to the front end. Yeah?
Okay.
And have you heard about the Crud Operations?
No.
So the CRUD operations are all the operations that you can do with a database, and it stands for, so CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete, because that's the main operations you can do with a database. And when we think of create, we have like a method associated to create, that is the post. Have you heard about post? Post before?
This is the method when you submit the data from the front end to the back end?
Yeah. So post is associated with creating, because you see here when we have app.get, the get is associated with a read. So when you have a get request, you are reading the data. You are asking for the data, you want to read the data. When you are submitting data, you have post. So create will be associated to post. Read will be associated to get, and then update can be associated with put or patch. There is like different. And delete will be associated with the delete method. So this is like general. So today we are only gonna see the get, because for time reasons we won't have time to see more. But this is, so if you had post, you will have app.post if you were creating data. So yeah, thinking about databases, there are two main families. There are SQL and non-SQL. Have you ever heard about these ones?
Yeah.
Yep.
And what do you think is the difference between SQL and non-SQL? Can you name some difference?
I think first difference is just for the SQL database, you use relationship method to access the data. So basically you would have to have a key primary and secondary where you will link the tables between them. With NoSQL database, NoSQL, then you will access the data via, I think, JSON files, so they are not linked between each other, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's exactly that. So that's the main difference. So the SQL, you can also call them relational databases, and non-SQL, they can be called non-SQL or non-relational databases. The main advantage of SQL is that when you have very complex data and you need to have a lot of relationships between the data, SQL are the best for that case. And non-SQL, the data is structured in documents and like very similar to JSON files. And the data doesn't have this kind of relationship. It can have relationships, but they are much more simple than in SQL. So let's see an example here. For example, I have this is like it could be the database of an online store. So we could have, for example, 3 tables here, and these tables, as Maxim was saying, they have an ID. Each record have an ID. So user ID, product ID, and this last table, orders, have the IDs of the users and the IDs of the products. So by accessing this table, you can join the information with the other tables. Do you understand this?
Yeah.
So it's all relationships, and in a NoSQL database, there are many different types of NoSQL, but I'm gonna focus on how it will be a document in MongoDB. So this is the kind of document. This is the structure of a document, and it may look quite familiar because what does it look like? This kind of a structure.
Is with the APIs that we take, could we use?
Yeah,
right?
It's also, it's like it's JSON format. It's like an object in JavaScript. So that's why working with MongoDB is very easy if you are used to JavaScript, because then you know how to access the data easily. And if you see the difference, it's like in a document in JavaScript, the data is like hierarchical. So all this document, for example, could belong to a user in Facebook. So it's all information related to one person. And you could have a post, and then the post could have content, date, comments. Each comment could have more comments, more likes. So it's like a bit like hierarchical. And in a SQL, the data is structured in tables. The advantage of non-SQL is that it's easy to scale. And you can have documents with different information needs. It doesn't have to be, so one user may have birthday and another one may not have birthday. And another one may have, I don't know, relationship status and the other one doesn't. So it's much more flexible, and because of this, it's quite trendy and is mainly used like in startups or new companies. But you will have like very traditional companies that are still using SQL, and SQL is still very good. It's not that it's better or worse. It mainly depends on what type of data you're going to be working with. So, any questions?
Well, I might ask, which type of the database is the faster, let's say, or it depends on the use case and what they're trying to build?
I couldn't tell you that. I don't really know very well, but I don't know what is the. I guess if you have a very big data with SQL with a lot of relationship, I'm imagining it may take longer to access the data because you have to navigate all these relationships, probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it actually makes sense.
I don't.
All the dependencies. Okay.
Yeah, and also like non-SQL databases like MongoDB, they are meant to be very good for a big amount of data. So I think Mongo comes from Mongoose, or was it? Something like that. That means huge. So it's good for huge amount of data.
So how would they access the data in MongoDB?
So it's similar to when we will see this, but I will go to that point like by the end of the workshop. But it's similar to when you navigate in an object.
Okay.
All these will be documents. All this will be a document, and you have to see this as an object. And the same way that we have here the data. Let's see. This is the data of the users we have. You see? So we will manage to have the data from the database in this kind of format.
Right.
So it will be, if we already know how to work with this data, we will be able to work with MongoDB data. So yeah, when we think of MongoDB, you can have the MongoDB running locally or in a remote database. So in this workshop, I'm going to focus on the remote database because, as Ricardo was saying, there are very good instructions in Codeflix for how to install the local database. So I think it's from task 26 to 28 is explaining how to set up the database. And normally you will need the local database when you are developing the project to do tests. And then when you deploy the app, you will need to have a remote database because otherwise people won't be able to access your data because data will be stored in your computer. So you will need the remote database. And in order to be able to communicate Node.js with the database, you will need to install the Mongodb driver. So you will install, like we do all the dependencies. We'll always put npm install OE MongoDB. And yeah. So for now, let's start creating a MongoDB account in Atlas and see how that is. Let me see. Okay. So I have already created my account, but just to go through the process of how you set it up. So the good thing of Atlas is that it's free, but it's only free for a limit. So you have a limit of amount of data you can save, but for development purposes, it should be enough. So let's call this workshop, email, Elena. I don't know, this is not gonna work. Let's add something here. Elena. Yeah. So this may be a bit slow. But... So one thing to mention is in MongoDB, the data is structured in documents, as I was saying, but all these documents are saved into collections. So a collection in MongoDB is similar to a table in Excel. So let me show you. So in Excel, in SQL, we have like a table customers. So in MongoDB, instead of having a table customer, you will have a collection called customers. And then each customer will be in a document. And that's because you will see now in MongoDB the word collection, so you know what it means. So we create here a cluster. That is where the data is going to be stored. And then here, I will just go for Amazon Web Services. And we will select the country that is closer to us. So I'll go for Ireland. In here, we need to make sure it says M0 Sandbox, because it's the one that is free forever. And then here, we can change the name of the cluster if we want. But I think it doesn't make a difference. So I'm going to leave it as it is. And then we create the cluster. So this is going to take probably 1 or 2 minutes. So in the meantime, I'm gonna jump to my account that I created for this workshop. So yeah. So once that finishes running, you will see this screen. And in here, we are in clusters. We click on collections. And now we can create our database here. So this is the database I have already done, but let's do it now again from scratch. So we will click here on create database, and we will give it a name. So I'm going to call it workshop 2. And where we are going to create is a list of users. So the collection is going to be called users. And I click on create. Then I go here to the users, and I just insert documents. I just enter here the key value pairs. So name, I don't know, give me a name.
Elena.
Nice. Okay, enter, and then age. You have to be sure here you select the right type of data. By default it's a string, so we will go for int32, that is integer. I don't know, 30, I don't know. And then here we will select the gender, masculine. So we click insert, and yeah, to create a document is as simple as that, and you can create as many as you want. But to be quicker, you can also click here and clone and just replace, like, I don't know, Mary, 32, feminine. So yeah, I think this is quite user friendly. It's very easy to interact with, and because I have already created my list of users, I'm gonna use the one I created so we can see more data in the front end. So I have created this list of users with Phoebe, Rachel, Monica, Chandler, Ross, and Gunter. So we have 7. We have friends here and the writer, and this is the data I want to display in my database. Sorry, my database in my application that I created, and instead of the data that I'm showing right now, because at the moment I'm showing a random list of users, as you can see here, Peter, John, Daniel, and so we will know when the data is coming from the front end, and when it's coming from the back end, and when it's coming from MongoDB Atlas. So the next step is to click in Connect. So we go to Clusters and click on Connect. But I'm going to show you how it will be if it's the first time you register with MongoDB Atlas. If you click on Connect, you will need to add an IP address, and also you will need to create your username and password. For the IP address, for development purposes, we will add 0000/0, and this means access from everywhere. So we will add this IP address, and then we will create a username and a password, and we need to take a note of this username and password because we will need to use it hard-coded in the link to connect to MongoDB Atlas. Let me know if I'm talking very quick because maybe I'm going a bit quick.
No.
Is it? Yeah?
Yeah, fine.
All right.
No, all good.
Okay, so yeah, these steps I have already done them in my account. So yeah, but you add here your name, your username, and the password, and just take a note of it. And after you have done that, when you click on Connect again, you will be able to see this screen. And what we want to do right now is to connect to our application. So we click here, and we select what is the language we're using. In this case, it's Node.js, but it could be Python, it could be other language you're using. So in this case, we went for Node.js, and we choose the latest version. And this is the link that I was saying you about. So you will need to replace a password with the password that you just created. Your user ID is already here hard-coded. And the database, you will also need to replace it with the database that we just created. In the case of the database I created, it's called Workshop. So we will copy this link, and save it somewhere for now, like in Notepad or something, and replace the password and the database name. So now let's go to the app. And in here, we will need to add the code to create the connection between Node.js and MongoDB. So I found the easiest to follow guide for me is the one in W3 Schools. So we will just copy this code, and I will explain you what it does. So I will send you also all these links in Slack later. So we copy this code and add it here. And what this is doing is, because we have already installed MongoDB, the driver, now we are requiring Mongo client from MongoDB. And in here, the URL, we will need to add the URL that we just copied from Atlas. So I have it here already, mine. So I will replace it here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we will replace here the URL that comes from Atlas. And then Mongo client will connect to the URL that we are just passing here. And if there is an error in this connection, it will throw an error in the console. If there is no an error, the database will be safe in the variable DBO, but we need to replace the name with the name of our database. that in this case is called workshop. And then this will be the database. And to access the collection, users, we will have to do .collection and put the name users. And then this .find is similar to filter in JavaScript. It will give you all the documents that match with the filter that you put here. So even if it said find, don't get confused with normal find in JavaScript. It will be more like filter because it's not only gonna give you one, it's gonna give you all the documents that match this filter here. If you leave the filter empty, it's gonna give you everything, all the documents. But in here you could add like a filter. You could say, for example, gender masculine, and it will only give you the men in the list. But for the example, we are gonna leave it empty, so it's gonna give us everything. And then this toArray will transfer the data into an array. And if there is a problem when it's transforming the data to an array, it will throw an error. And if not, it will give us the result. We can call it documents to make it a bit maybe more clear. Documents. And what this will do, if we just run it like this, it should display the data from MongoDB Atlas on the console. Is this clear? I can go through it again. Or...
Yeah, no, so workshops the database, users the collection, and then documents are the individual documents within users.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So now let's see. Sorry, let me open this. Sorry, guys. npm one. So we should be able to see the data printed. Okay, something has gone wrong. Let me check. What is this? Okay. I'm not sure what I have done wrong.
So it looks like you're running the app in somewhere else, right?
Okay, yeah, sorry. Let me...
Maybe in the other terminal you're running maybe the app, or probably you want to stop it first and then try again?
Yeah. Okay, let's try again. Pm run start dev. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so here we can see the data. You see, friends are printed on the console.
And all these have been created, Elena, on the MongoDB that you created.
Yes.
And you just call them from the MongoDB inside like a remote API, you would say, but it's not API.
Yeah, it's not an API. It's like when we were creating the documents.
Yeah.
So
just call the documents to come with the details of the things you want.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll show you.
Yeah, great.
I'll show you again here where they are. So.
Elena, can I just ask you that? So Atlas is the equivalent to my PHP admin.
Oh, I'm not sure what is my SPA. I don't know what is that. Sorry.
Okay.
Maybe Ricardo.
I think PHP admin is more like a to manage relationship database rather than Atlas, just the particular app for the MongoDB, I suppose.
So can you import like CSV files into Atlas?
Ah.
Wouldn't be able, I think, yeah.
So, well, I wanted to comment that at the end, but maybe yes, because you are talking about that. So Atlas is the new graphic user interface. No, sorry, let me rephrase that. Let me start over. Atlas is the new cloud system for MongoDB. Let me highlight the new one, because if you search on Google, you may find, including conflicts documentation, I'm afraid, you may find references to something called MLab. Guys, please ignore any reference to MLab, because MLab is the old /legacy database engine for MongoDB. So the new one is called Atlas. So Atlas is essentially a bunch of hardware and software resources running in the cloud to host your MongoDB databases. There's nothing else, nothing more. So with Atlas, you can create new databases, you can add documents, you can check your data, you can back up your data, of course. So you can essentially deal with your database hosted in the cloud. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
All right, so what we want to do, this is okay, we are showing it in the console log, so we know it works and the connection has been successful, but what we want to do is to show it in the front end. So what we will need to do is to add the code we have already, all this code, we will add it inside the connection. So, but we will add it after we have created the variable database. So we will add all this code here. And then in here, as you can see, we are sending the data that is coming from the JSON file. So we will need to replace this part of the code and add this query where we are getting the data from the database. It's a bit confusing, this step, but maybe you will, when you see me doing, maybe it's easier. So I'm gonna comment this out to have it as a reference. And I'm gonna remove this part because we are not sending the data from the JSON file. And I'm gonna create open and close curly braces. And I will enter here inside the query where we are trying to find all the records and converting them to an array and sending them to the console. So I will cut this and add it in here. And now what we want to replace, we don't want to send the documents to the console. We instead want to send them to the front end. So to send the data to the front end, we need the res.send. And instead of data, we will have to put documents. So we can copy this and replace the console log with documents instead of data. Documents. And this should work. This should be able to display now the friends people in the front end. So let's see if it works. The host. And there it is. We have Phoebe, Rachel, Monica, Sheldon, Joey, Rose, and Gunter. It's
nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. I'm gonna do one of you later. That's right.
But and there are more things we can do. It's not much time to explain everything here, but I'm gonna show you here. You have the Crud Operations, and in this manual it's very easy to follow. So if you go to read operations, that's what we are doing. Could filter like by age, for example. Age greater than 18. And this, for example, is called projection. So when you are querying the data, by default, you are querying all the properties in that document. But it may be, you may not want to retrieve everything. Maybe you just want to get the name and the address. So you will put the fields and the number 1 next to the fields that you want to retrieve from the data. You can also limit the number of records that you want to get that you want to retrieve. So you may have 100, but you may be interested only in the top 3. So you could put limit 3. So let's do a little example here of how to. So I'm going to ask you, how will you get, if you wanted to get only the women, what will you put in the filter here? Anyone?
Gender and then
Gender?
Column.
Yeah.
F.
Yeah. So now we refresh. And we should only see the girls. For example, if you want to get the ones that are over 18, I'll show you here as well. Oh, no less than, but over 18. So, for example, we will do. I'm gonna have to move it this way because I don't have space. So we will do age here. Age, and then it's a bit different to when you are filtering by string. If you filter by number, it's slightly different. So you will use the $sign and then greater than colon 18. And it should give us the users that are over 18. Now, click here. Yeah.
Cool.
And then same, you do less than, so give us the ones that are under 18. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and I mean, that's mainly the whole thing, but one thing that I don't have time to mention in the workshop is you should never push this to GitHub. Do you know why?
Mm-mm.
You expose your access to the database.
Yeah, so you are passing your username and database, and if you have very confidential information, then it's really, really dangerous. So you normally save this URL in an environmental variable that I can show you how you want. You can ask me, and I can tell you how later. But you will need to install this dependency and then add this require at the beginning of your code. And then you will create a file called .env, where you will put, for example, a database URL and the URL. And in your code, you will access that information using process.env and the name, the URL, database URL. And that way, and you won't push the .env file to GitHub. That way, your details will be safe. Yeah, I explained this very, very quick, just so if you want to investigate about it, you know where to go. But yeah, it's just always make sure you don't send this to the cloud, to GitHub. And yeah.
That was great.
Yeah, it was a bit
Really
quick.
useful.
I'm going to try later and create the practice and stuff. That's great.
Yeah, and you should check also this. I will send you all these links in Slack, but in here you have also all the possible connections you can do, all the, how to connect to MongoDB, how to insert a document, how to find all documents. That's what we do.
You can send this, that is the documentation from MongoDB. That's
Yeah, you can. So you can have it.
Okay,
I just
yeah.
W3 schools, but there's a lot of documentation there, and it's quite good. So I'll send you the links later, and thank you very much. And sorry if I was a bit quick, but it's just...
You're very slow, and that's good.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you very much, Elena.
Thank you.
That was great. I can